The objective of our lesson was to talk about trench warfare, what role new weapons played, how it tied into World War I and making World War I the way it was on the Western Front, and why it was key in the war lasting so long. So we, Ms. Cunnington and I came up with this project to actually build the trenches because it put it hands-on for our guys. They were able to utilize what we talked about with the trenches, the series of trenches, like they have the frontline trench and then a communication trench coming off of it. They explored no man's land and how no man's land was key. They even made craters because it talked about all the shelling that occurred in no man's land. They put men, and they were able to relate it back to the lesson on trench warfare, because they're like, they wouldn't be out there during the day, they're only out there during the night because of the machine guns and how the machine guns could actually kill more men. They were able to demonstrate going over the top of the trench with the little army men. And so it was just a good lesson that put it hands-on, and they now can tell you anything and everything you want to know about trench warfare because they put their hands on it and actually built it and saw it in a model. And so we just thought it was important for them to see that because it changed the Western Front.
So the hands-on activity, you feel like, gave them a better perspective of the content that you had provided them. It actually allowed them to put it into play?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. What were your student responses to this?
They loved it. They spent the whole time concentrating very hard on how to put everything perfectly, and they once we actually had it all built, we gathered around it and actually discussed how it related back to what they had learned. And they were talking about the communication trench, and they even talked about things that we talked about, life in the trenches. And so I would be like, okay, these little guys in the trenches, what would their life be like if that was actually them? And they were like, they'd get trench foot and different things. They pull that vocabulary that we had talked about. They talked about, going over the top, and somebody actually took one of these that didn't glue down and actually went over the top and dropped them in no man's land. So it just was good for me to actually have them take the content and put their hands on it.
Absolutely. You're familiar with the Common Core as it's coming down, right?
Yes.
Yes, and in Common Core, it's hugely performance-based.
Yes.
And so would you consider this a performance-based task?
I do.
How did you start this? Was it with direct instruction?
It was. We introduced the lesson, we talked about trench warfare, and then on the day of, we actually gave them the instructions of what we were doing and then broke it down into groups. And each group had a set of instructions and a set task that they were responsible for. And then they came together as a group and put it together as a class.
And then you came back and you discussed it. So not only did you give them direct instruction, you gave them a performance-based task that allowed them to get involved in the lesson, and then you had a whole group discussion, which allowed for reflection time as well. Wow, that's a pretty great lesson and an excellent demonstration of a performance-based task. Thank you, Ms. Gavan.
Thank you. Okay, 3 weeks we've been covering World War I, and my third block it's been one battle after another of trying to get them to remember content, and the only thing the other day during the review that they could pull out and answer my questions about was this right here, this World War I trench. They could tell me about going over the top. They could tell me about no man's land, and they could tell me the importance of the machine gun. But it's the only thing that they could remember was the thing that they put their hands on. And so as a teacher, I know I'm going to have to adjust for them and make more things like this, because that's what makes it stick with them. And it's so frustrating to know that if I could just adjust it, then they can actually get it.
Excellent.